This is the Converge Podcast, brought to you by the Converge Institute. Each week, brilliant minds specializing in AI, blockchain, and fintech come together to challenge the status quo and empower disruption. Sponsored by our founding council, Nakusa, Bank Social, the Texas Blockchain Council, and the Universal AI University.
Welcome, everybody, to the Converge Podcast. At Converge, we focus on blockchain, fintech, and AI in order to disrupt the status quo. And today, we're diving into the world of brand storytelling, entertainment innovation, and digital strategy with the CEO of Lapse Incorporated, Barrett Kuhre. Is that how do you pronounce your last name, bro?
Oh, it's Blake. Curry. Like Thai curry, Indian curry. Yeah.
Stephen Curry.
Yep, Stephen Curry. You're a basketball fan. That's right. That's what my wife always says.
Oh, you know what? And it says right here on my notes, it's Curry. All right. Well, very good. Blake, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Very excited to be here. Looking forward to talking to you, especially given, where you're located in Dallas, Texas. That's actually my hometown. And so I always have a soft spot for it and go back quite frequently to see family and friends, and definitely miss Tex-Mex.
Oh my gosh.
Don't miss the pounds that come with it, but and certainly the cost of living. I'm based here in LA as our company is. And so it's definitely a better value in Texas, I think, for a lot of things. So, but still, I think LA has, great weather. They still got Texas beat on that.
Oh my gosh. Well, what people say who live in California is you pay for the weather, though.
That is true.
Right?
Yes.
So yes, it's beautiful weather, but you pay for that in a lot of different ways. And actually, we here in Texas, we start seeing a lot of people coming here from California, not so many going from here, Texas to California. It's the other way around, but we have a trade deficit there.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I hear. You did the opposite. People tell me that all the time. But no, I mean, I moved out to LA almost 17 years ago. I was transferred here with the Walt Disney Company at the time. And what a lot of people don't know, and you always would ask is that, wow, Texas had a Disney outpost of some kind. And yeah, actually it did. In terms of where I was located within the company, it was Radio Disney. And so Radio Disney, was the largest, I would say, nationwide children's entertainment, audio programming source for almost 2 decades. And I joined the company in 2004, actually starting within Disney at a country station because ABC, Disney owns ABC. And so they had a portfolio of stations. And so I realized that when the transition occurred within the Walt Disney Company, the outgoing CEO, Michael Eisner, was handing the reins over to Bob Iger, who's now the CEO yet again. And he made the declaration that in 2005, that they were going to divest all of the ABC radio properties and just keep Radio Disney and ESPN. So I thought I definitely want to stay with the company. So there was an opportunity to join Radio Disney. So I did so at a time that it was still sort of a sleepy backwater, I would say, network, but it had a portfolio of AM, FM stations across the country when people were actually listening to terrestrial radio. They still do. I'm not trying to knock it. It did start off my career, but that had transitioned into streaming. And so there was a really pivotal moment in my career within Disney that occurred when Disney Channel, when it folded into Disney Channel after the divestiture, there was a successful franchise called High School Musical that launched on Disney Channel, and stars were born out of that, from Zac Efron to Selena Gomez. Actually, now she was on her own series, Wizards of Waverly Place, but Vanessa Hudgens. There were many others that came from that. So they basically decided, okay, you guys are located in Dallas, and we have all these stars that we want to promote, but the only way we're going to be able to do that is if they're flying through Dallas-Fort Worth, which a lot of Disney stars actually came from Texas, believe it or not. And I do believe that was probably a big result of Dallas and Burbank having that American Airlines flight. There were so many nonstops every day. And so anyway, long story short, moved out here, started hosting the morning show, and had a great time. It was a really great opportunity. Getting up early at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. every day for 6, 7 years was definitely a big moment in my life. It was a lot of lot of tough dedication for sure, but it was well worth it because, I got to meet a lot of these, stars that were essentially just starting their careers and turning into successful megawatt celebrities. So at that time, if you think about it, this was 2008 through 13. Those are today's Gen Zs. And, I didn't recognize that at the time, but it was definitely a great opportunity. So I think that big part of my career from then to now is recognizing and incubating talent and compelling characters and having really engaging stories that are told by them. And I think as long as you have that personality aspect that's going to be prevalent in everything that you do, your audience is only going to continue to grow with you. So that's what we've been able to evolve into. And we certainly can talk about that and a lot more. But after I left Disney, I realized that as great as a company as it is, it's a slow moving ship. It still is to this day, as big multinationals are. But I was there for 10 years and wanted to start up space. And I realized that live streaming to me was the most compelling part of my journey. And that led to different startups, from what became the Citizen app, which is the news UGC, essentially user generated content. If someone's witnessing a fire or a car accident or something that's going on in their community, they can live stream it rather than wait around for, let's say, a local news station to broadcast live from there. That ended up going over. I led that effort and then went to Hulu and launched their live streaming platform when people started wanting to cord cut and get away from having that satellite cable bundle, which we now see is sort of the common practice. And now everyone's fighting over streaming market share, right, and live streaming in particular, like Netflix and even Amazon. They're investing heavily in live streaming sports games. You realize that anybody can watch anything at any time, but why should I be compelled enough to want to tune into something? And it's because it's live. There's no other chance to see it. So that led me to work for a joint venture between Tencent and ByteDance, which ByteDance is the parent company of TikTok, and it learned all about the live entertainment streaming industry and really helped roll that out here in the US. And it's something that has really been, I think, instrumental in so many different areas. I ended up, after that, leaving AliveMe and worked for a company called The Meet Group, which was working very closely with Match Group, which is also headquartered in Dallas, Texas, largest multinational dating portfolio. There helped integrate a lot of the live streaming into some of their apps because this was during also the pandemic and people weren't able to go and date as normal. So that was a way that people could connect better and find out who they work with, who they have a good vibe with, and learn too a lot about microtransactions and the gamification of live streaming. And now we see that to be sort of like the next frontier within TikTok. Live streaming is gamified live streaming in particular, and then also e-commerce, which is now really just what QVC and HSN have been for decades, but just 2.0. So it's really interesting to see how this is all evolving and entertainment is evolving. And so I'm really excited to be here, and thank you so much again for the opportunity. I look forward to discussing more about this and a whole lot more. So,
oh yeah, there's so much there. I think what is interesting to me, because what I was going to ask you, but you kind of led me to it already, is why blockchain? Why, is that something that is interesting to you? But you just talked about micropayments, and of course, AI, it absolutely has to use blockchain in order to transact business because it's got to use cryptocurrency. And in the entertainment space in particular, I've heard lots of really interesting things around tokenizing, trademarks and, intellectual property content as it relates to maybe somebody's image or their voice or, a song that they wrote or whatever the case may be. And I think that is kind of the next evolution of course, the internet, Web3, as we all move toward this completely digitally native environment. And I think what's interesting too, you said that in 2008, time period, you were working with some folks, entertainers at Disney, and realized those were Gen Z. But at that same time, Bitcoin was happening, right? So Bitcoin came about in 2008, 2009, which already has revolutionized how people see and use money, and has given people who might not otherwise have been able to have access to financial tools. Anybody with an internet connection can access financial tools now because of Bitcoin. So that's really an intriguing thing. And the company that you founded, talk a little bit about that, LAPS.
Certainly. So yeah, LAPS is an acronym. It's also a joint venture. But LAPS stands for Los Angeles, Paris, and Seoul. So LAPS is an evolution of a previous company, which was called Swim, where we have joined forces with three iconic companies across three continents, based here in LA, also in Paris for the Europe, Middle East, Africa region, and then Asia Pacific region, Seoul being in South Korea. And we really realized that the expertise and leveraging not only the prowess that exists across all of these different markets, but we realized that the only way that we're going to be able to do this is if we bring all of these together under one roof. And so if you look at, obviously Los Angeles, it's still the entertainment capital of the world. There's still all the gatekeepers here. The decisions are made here. The power lies here. That doesn't necessarily mean that, though, the production and a lot of the creation is going on here. We see that there's a lot of different companies that are investing and creating new spaces all across for example, in different states, they're shooting. And so there's a big challenge right now for the entertainment industry, to be honest. I think that that's no secret. So they're going through a bit of a reckoning, I would say, and also making some hard decisions right now. And there's so much up in the air, obviously, with AI and generative AI, and those points that you touched on when it comes to name and likeness and intellectual property. Those are all, I would say, a lot more easily tackled with NFTs and the capability to have sovereign ownership over that. But if you look at Paris, Paris is still the iconic fashion capital of the world. We believe what we're doing is, fashion is a very strong component of that, along with consumer packaged goods, especially ranging in the health and beauty space. And, South Korea is, and has been for decades now, really at the forefront of entertainment. And, you don't have to take my word for it. Just look at what Netflix has done. If you look at Squid Game, for example, if you look at Culinary Class Wars, if you look at a lot of their different franchises that they have, many of them are produced and made in South Korea. And so, that was another thing when I was at Disney. Psy's Gangnam Style came out, and that was a really defining moment, I think, that brought everyone into the forefront of South Korea and K-pop, as it were. And so K-pop has really transcended, and it's become, something that is a global phenomenon, and it's here to stay. And if you look at what Disney has done, with incubating and putting them through a sort of machine, as it were, to market and create entertainment, you have an entire country that's dedicated to that and does so very, very well and at a much better value across the board. And a lot of that is through, control, and a lot of that is through the way that they've been able to harness some incredible talent there. And South Korea, it was the country I've always admired, especially after moving to LA. The amount of the South Korean diaspora here is second only to South Korea itself in terms of there are more Koreans living in the Southern California area than anywhere else in the world other than in South Korea. But if you go there, and I had a chance to be invited to join a summit and a conference in late September last year, put on by KOCA, which is the Korean Creative Content Agency, which is an arm of the government, along with some private investors. And you see the capabilities that are there are worlds away, I would say, from where we are in so much of the Western marketplace and retail, just the way that they do pop-ups, for example. I'll give you an example. If you look at consumer products like high-end cosmetics. Two brands in particular come to mind. Aesop, and I always mispronounce that, the Australian brand that was purchased by, I think, L'Oreal. And then you look at Diptyque, French brand. They're known for their scents and their candles and so much more. And you looked at if there were even a line outside these insole, not at all. But if you look at a brand called Tambourines, for example, which never have heard of, they have an experiential, immersive environment that's staggered in such a way that it's an event to just experience and to grab hold of and to try out. And the line was literally, all over around the block and up and down, and it at a much lower cost too. And so I think that that's a huge benefit that we're looking at in terms of we leverage the expertise of, in particular, one company that's based in Paris that has the heritage of creating one of the most iconic virtual influencers known as Little Michaela. She has gone on to become over 3 million followers on Instagram alone and has become almost a brand ambassador for many different brands, because brands are starting to wake up and realize that influence is going to be redefined. It is being redefined. And they still want to have brand ambassadors and evangelists to represent them. However, as we've seen over the past several years, especially, there's a lot of controversy that surrounds being involved with a particular influencer or a celebrity. And that can be damaging, very damaging to a brand, very costly too. So why does it make sense to try and seek out a lot of these influencers that, in essence, become liabilities? So we want to lessen that liability. We want to give brands more control. And we also want to give them more customization and still have a really powerful, engaging connection with the end consumer. Because at the end of the day, it's all about characters and it's all about really a compelling story. And I think that as long as you have that and you're having a better way of producing it and rolling it out and connecting, this is where we see a tremendous opportunity.
That's really interesting to me, because what you're talking about is a brand is really an experience, right? You just talked about in South Korea, they're incorporating the actual experience, a physical, immersive experience as it relates to a cosmetics brand. I'm curious about that experience. You said people were lined up in order, kind of like they would be for a ride, right? To experience that. Yeah. What would they actually experience? Did you go through that experience to see what it was like? What was it like to go through that?
Well, I can tell you it was very well thought out and planned. There was a art installation that was next door that had the most incredible looking, you would think that you were at a Michelin-starred restaurant, because it was a coffee shop, but under this glass case were all of these different beautiful desserts that had an incredible amount of detail that were on display. And I just thought it was art, but it was actually, you could order this and consume.
And you could eat the dessert.
Yeah, you could eat it. And it was in a glass box like you were at a jewelry store. And so you see this, and then I thought, this is really something. And then a friend of mine who was there said, yeah, you can order this right over there at the bar. And I thought, wow, for a lot of people, this is just having a dessert is a big deal. And that usually comes at the end of a meal. But if you can have it really created, and we're talking about the kind of detail was absolutely indescribable, just incredible. So afterwards, I went into the restroom to wash my hands, and I noticed this beautifully created bottle. And actually, I have it. I can share it with you if you'll just give me.
Oh, how cool. Yes.
In no way am I at all endorsing this brand or being paid for this. But I went into the bathroom and I noticed the hand soap that was there. And I saw, this is unlike any other hand soap I've ever seen before, a brand I've never heard of before. So this is it. And I can show it to you because I think that I haven't even opened it yet because I'm trying to see.
So was this soap associated with the cosmetics company that was doing this experiential event?
Yes. And so that is exactly when I came out of the bathroom, I said, this is unlike anything I've ever seen before. It's beautiful. It smells incredible. It was like, what? Have you heard of this brand? It's like, oh, yeah. So I took a picture of it and showed him. It was like, oh, yeah, that's where we're going next. How smart, right? A lead into your next experience. So I can just show you this. Like,
I would love to.
look at this bottle, right?
Uh-huh. It's
Like,
beautiful.
And you would think it could be made from, stone or something.
It looks like stone or ceramic.
Right, ceramic, right? But it's not. It's plastic.
Oh my gosh.
So this, but it smells incredible. And so went into this next door, and as you're approaching it from the street, there's a line. And so it's an entire glass box that peers down into a floor area that has a lot of these rose thorns that are sticking out of the ground that are, 3-4 feet tall. And so all these people are lined up around the perimeter of this, and they're looking down. So the first step is you're in a line. Of course, everybody wants a line. Apple wants a line. Every time there's a new product, there's a line, some kind of queue. So they're all queued up outside, and now they're looking down at the people that are shopping and that are partaking in this experience. So what does that do? Well, it builds anticipation because you're looking down, you're seeing, oh, I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to experience what they're experiencing. I want to be able to smell and try out these different things. And so it builds that anticipation and that factor. And so the next step after you make it past this queue at the top, you're led down a stairwell, and then now you're on the floor and you're actually able to experience this for everything, from soaps to lip balm to, lotions, all these different kinds of cosmetics, all from a brand I've never heard of before. It doesn't exist here yet, but it's done in a boutique sort of way. So if you ever go into a luxury boutique, you know that you can't just pick something up off the counter and go to the register. You basically find an associate, and then they will mark it up, and then they will basically ring it up for you at the register. Goes back to when I was a kid, service merchandise was that way, which doesn't exist anymore. But it was, you like what you see, write it down, hand it to the cashier, and then it magically appears. So that's exactly what happened. And so they basically, I got, a couple of them, and then they present it, in a very whimsical,
beautiful
bag, which has strange looking,
yeah.
So,
right.
Lovely takeaway, right? Nice memento. Not costly at all. I mean, I think that was maybe $15 or $20. Now, you compare that to Diptyque, or you compare that to Aesop, for example, that's going to be 2-3 times as much. So,
oh yeah,
they have recognized that people want value, people want an experience, and people also want a great aesthetic. And so I think that from a brand's perspective, that is what brands are trying to do. Not everybody is successful in doing that. But how are you going to basically engage the consumer in a way where they're going to be willing to part with their money, and they're willing to become brand loyal, they're willing to try it out? You do that through experiences, pop-ups. That's another thing that we don't see often enough here, a pop-up retail experience where it's a limited time. A retailer, well, say a brand will come in and they'll take over a space that's, unoccupied. Commercial real estate is already having enough of a problem, so it's not a issue to get a space for a month.
Right.
And to have this, you come in, and now you have an engaged audience, and it's for a limited time. Time is a very important thing. Sense of urgency. You have to do it before it's gone. And you get to experience that. What if you can't do pop-ups? Well, you can do that through, online engagement. You could do that through virtual experiences as well. So, or you can supplement that with it. So anyway, that was just something that really stood out to me. And it's just one example. I mean, there's others, but I think that really made an indelible impact upon me, because I really don't see that to be the case here in the U.S. done often enough. Occasionally in bigger cities, sometimes there's road shows, or there's, they go on a tour, but you just don't get to see that, especially for something that you're not familiar with. And a lot of times, it's not necessarily about the product you want to experience. It's just the experience itself. And if you're tied to the brand in doing that, it can be truly game changing. I mean, and you become brand loyal after that experience. And best form of advertising still is word of mouth. So you're going to tell someone, you're going to tell your friends, you're going to tell your family about your experience. And it was just something that really look forward to doing a lot more of, especially those immersive DOE experiences or digital out of home. So it's no longer just an out of home experience. It's also digitally created. And so we're seeing that to be the case in other international markets, but not so much here in the US. So that's also where we believe there's a big opportunity to roll this out strategically.
Yeah. Talk about digital out of home. I have not heard that phrase before. So talk to me a little bit about what exactly is that? And what's fascinating to me is, of course, we're also digitally connected now globally, right? Because we can connect through social media. You mentioned TikTok, but I mean, there's multiple different channels. Of course, there's various communities who connect, whether it's on Telegram or, a Discord server or, depending on the community, depending on what it is they tend to gravitate toward, that's the medium that in which they congregate. But that digital experience is interesting to me because you mentioned Gen Z earlier. They want that experiential experience, for lack of being redundant. But they also want to do in real life stuff, not only digital. So you mentioned digital out of home. What out of home means you're physically going somewhere, but digital means it's in a digital world. So help me understand that.
So the traditional way to describe out of home is to look at it like billboards are considered out of home. Airport advertising is considered out of home. It's a way that, the advertising industry describes having a touch point where a consumer is engaged and it's not, physically in their home. So they're out and about, essentially. Mm-hmm. When it's digital out of home, it's more, you could argue that, well, this is a digital billboard, but it goes far beyond that. It should be more immersive. So I would say the best type of experience here in the US right now would be the Sphere in Las Vegas. That is an immersive experience. It's something that when it's not being used and it's idle, essentially, it will continue to project imagery, yes, and engage the audiences that are around, whether that be, through, because I think it's also by a golf course. If it sees a golf ball coming its way, it's a big smiley face that reacts and, it gives time and temperature, that sort of thing. So that's nice. But if you look going beyond that, if you look at, for example, what they're doing in other markets, what they're planning to do with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, in particular, Qiddiya, which is a city not far from the capital, Riyadh, they are investing heavily in immersive out-of-home, digital immersive out-of-home experiences. And it's one that will envelop you in such a way that you are now part of this story. And it's not one that you're going to have to put on glasses. It's not one where you're going to have to use your phone. It's actually going to be there as just part of your daily walk or your journey, let's say, through an outdoor shopping arcade. It's a way that you can really wow an audience. And think of it as like Times Square, but the evolution of that. And I think that if you see the capabilities there, they are truly impressive. And having the capability to interact with them on a much larger scale is really something that we're looking to roll out. And it can happen certainly in a more closed environment like a Sphere, for example, or like a concert venue. But if you can do it where there already is an audience that isn't expecting it and it's unexpected and they're engaging, that can be really powerful. And it can also interact with the audience and in such a way that you can have the kind of interaction where, if you were walking around, let's say Times Square, and there was a street performer, people typically will gather around and watch it. Well, it's the same thing. If there is an immersive digital out-of-home experience, people will also gather around and they will record it and they will engage with it and they will interact with it, especially if it's actually physically talking to you and calls out, like, say, what you're wearing and stops you in your tracks. That's one way. Another way, too, going back to more of a closed environment, like a concert, you look no further than many years ago, there was a virtual band created called the Gorillas. And the Gorillas are not a real band. They're all virtual characters. They're all essentially gorillas. And one could also argue that the Gorillas was inspiration behind the Bored Ape Yacht Club, because so much of the details that came from that band were, woven into that, arguably the most successful NFT franchise today. But there are a lot more capabilities for these types of experiences. And what it's going to take is the right kind of conditioning to occur within the audience to be able to accept that. And what I mean by that is, if you look at iconic movie like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, or most recently, Alita Battle Angel, you have virtual characters animated. They don't exist in real life, but they're interacting with real people in real life. And so if you can introduce this in that way, it will be a lot more palatable and embracing for an audience to accept it, and then to start following it, to start engaging with it, to start buying product from it. It does take a certain level of that type of a bridge for it to really work. For you to just throw in, a virtual influencer or avatar out of nowhere and have no kind of endorsement or introduction from the human side, that's probably not going to be as successful. So there still needs to be that, because at the end of the day, we're all human and we all have to have that relatability, and to have that whole scariness go away. That's a big part of it. So I think that there's a strategy there that's really going to be important to be sensitive to, because otherwise it's more than likely not going to be successful. And I even spoken, and this has happened, for many years. For example, in other markets like in Japan and in South Korea, maybe they haven't taken off as well as they could have, but it's also because of the way that they were introduced. So a lot of it is how it's presented. That's going to be a big key to the adoption.
That's so interesting to me. And when you were describing that interactive experience, I'm recalling a museum visit that I went to in Florida, and it was a Salvador Dali museum. And I had some extra time. I was there for work, and they had a big screen, and there were several of them throughout the museum, and Salvador Dali would appear there, and he would interact with you. And it was pleasantly surprising. And, he's a unique character, right? The way he looks and the way he's dressed, and his mustache and that kind of thing, and his funny, facial expressions. And it made walking through the museum all that much better, because I was able to interact, and it's kind of surprising. You walk past and you see him there, and he's like, "Hey," and it's like, what is this? This is crazy. So, I mean, how cool is that? And so you're kind of merging that virtual experience, because you just mentioned you don't have to have the goggles. You're not going into a virtual environment, although you could, but you're not. But you're kind of bridging that gap between the reality and virtual reality, which is really, really fascinating. So that's what you guys do at Laps.
That's right. So at Laps, essentially, what we're aiming to do is really create compelling characters with engaging stories, and doing it in a way that is virtual. And we already have the heritage through our joint venture of creating one of the most iconic virtual influencers with little Michaela, but there's so much more that can be done there. And if you look at, especially within the cosmetic space, and fashion, Maybelline actually just launched a virtual influencer, because I think they recognize the same reasons by why we are doing what we're doing, essentially, which is recognizing that the brands need to have more control over their influencers. They just do. And this is some tough love. Like, influencers are expensive, they are unpredictable, they are demanding, and they also tend to not represent the brand or the deal as well as the brand hopes that they would. So if you can control those elements and you can still engage with audiences and you can still get them to sell product, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And that this may sound harsh, but I mean, this is the truth. Like if you're able to do those things and you're doing it at a better value, then why wouldn't a brand want that? The question is, how are they going to go about doing it? And so we really are that how, because we have this capability and we've done this now collectively through many different brands. And the thing is, most of these have been based in Europe. And so taking this to the US market, taking this to Asian market, taking this to other markets just beyond, say, the Renault Group or L'Oreal or different football clubs in Europe, which is great. But there needs to be a presence here in, for example, in Los Angeles. There has to be that, because these are, media and entertainment companies are still largely headquartered here, and they still are the gatekeepers. They're still the decision makers. They need to see it to believe it. And they also need to have the understanding of how are you going about doing this. So a lot of this is done through motion capture. A lot of this is also done through generative AI. But really, it's not going to be something that you can just flip a switch and it's all done for you. If you look at what generative AI is able to accomplish right now, it is very impressive. Midjourney is very impressive. There's a lot of different things that can be done, but it's still not good enough. It's comical, but you also don't want to try and lead an audience to believe that this is something that isn't, it's a deep fake. We don't want to do that. The point is that this is essentially endorsed by the brand, and it is a character of the brand, or say it's a character of a new music group that's introduced by actual musicians. Let's say maybe they have a cameo in a music video, and that's how you get to know them. So this is something that we recognize. Again, this is why we have this joint venture with a Parisian company and Seoul company, and we have these different entities in these different continents, because simply American culture is not there yet in terms of this type of innovation. The audience is here, the market is here. This is why everybody wants in here. But do we have these capabilities? I would say collectively we do, but on our own we don't, not just yet. So there's a tremendous untapped amount of opportunity that really has yet to be fully rolled out. And, it's going to take probably 5 years for it to get to that point. But that's the case with everything. The iPhone came out in 2007. At Disney, for example, we didn't even really start paying attention to the level in which that's going to be a disruptor for another 5 years. I can even remember asking a question in a town hall in 2012 saying, hey, I raised my hand and said, hey, what are we doing about cord cutting? And everyone kind of looked around the room like, what is cord cutting? And this was in 2012. So, clearly there's a lot of opportunity for growth, and there's a lot of opportunity for innovation. So is it all going to be done here? No, we can definitely say that that's not the case. We're going to need to look elsewhere where there is more of I would say, embracing this. But I do believe that it can certainly take off here, and the timing is definitely right for this, especially given the new administration's embracing of crypto and recognizing that the decisions that are being made, having David Sachs in the position that he's in makes a lot of sense. There's going to be a lot more of these developments that are going to continue to roll out. And I think that the entertainment, there's just so many different things that are going to be coming. But when it comes to blockchain in particular, and bringing it back to blockchain, if you look at the most successful apps and you look at their transaction capabilities, they all have to go through the Google Play and Apple App Store. And they generally will take a 30% cut for every transaction. So this has always been the bane of almost everyone's existence that's doing microtransactions, subscriptions online and through their apps. They don't want to have that. And it's really unfair. And, there have been companies that have fought Apple about this. And really, if you, for example, if you look at where TikTok is right now, it's in a sort of interesting position, because you cannot download the app from Google or Apple. You cannot transact with the app through topping up your credits if you will say, or going to go into the entertainment live streaming side of it and say you want to provide virtual gifts to the creators. You can't do that. You have to go to a website, which makes it, there's more friction. Anytime there's more friction, people start losing interest. So they're trying to push e-commerce. You can, do Apple Pay, and that's great. But, they also have to have compelling product and compelling, characters and creators that are selling through that product. So yeah, that's where I see blockchain really being able to be leveraged within this space, are through these microtransactions and through these subscriptions and through engaging with a character that, say, is going beyond just representing a brand, but is now almost like a friend, and you're talking with them and you're subscribing to them, you're finding a way to engage with them. That's going to be, I think, a big part of it. Another great one is the collectible aspect in terms of access. So I was at this investor dinner right before CES, and someone came up to me and asked if I wanted to try some of this scotch. I said, sure, yeah, I love scotches. It's from Suntory. Look at Suntory, of course. It's a great, great company. But I was like, but do you know that Suntory has launched NFT for special tasting so that you can have access to Master Distiller's Reserve and all these special blends that are 20, 30, 40, 50 years old? I had no idea. But to do that, you have to buy one of their NFTs to actually have that access. So access is huge. That's going to be very disruptive for the ticket sellers of the world, like Ticketmaster, Live Nation, unless they can find a way to leverage that. But we're going to see a lot more access capabilities. Even restaurants here. There's one in particular in LA that is a all-you-can-eat premium barbecue restaurant, really like A5 Japanese type beef. And to get access to it, to have the full access to the full menu, you have to have one of their NFTs. Never thought I would see the day, but that is now what it's going to take. Someone has to set a precedent. And once someone sets a precedent, now others are going to follow suit, or they're just going to sit back on the sidelines and watch it play out and decide when is going to be the best moment to get in the game.
That is NFTs. There's so much we could talk about NFTs, but that's fascinating to me. I had never heard of an NFT being used in that specific way, but that's a perfect use case for an NFT. And speaking of NFTs and blockchain, you're going to be at ETH Denver. So
I will have I personally will not be there, but one of our founding partners will be there. So he actually leads the South Korean contingency for our company. And yes, so we're looking forward to having presence there. It's great venue and it's a great opportunity. But I won't be able to make it this time, however, but I know it's going to be another great show.
So are you guys going to have like a booth? What if people are there and want to find out more about what you guys do?
Yeah, booths are not something that we have embraced in the past. It's not to say that we won't do them in the future, but we're being very, I'd say we're keeping a bit of a low profile as of right now, because we are not in a position where we want to beat the drum just yet. We're sort of like taking the temperature and recognizing that we're going to be getting into our seed round very soon. And we also want to make sure we have the right kind of, the best players and the best advisors, the best people that can really help bring value to what we want to do and believe in that vision. So it is something that, I think they're great, but I think there's other better ways that are also provide better value for a company through guerrilla marketing that I think is a lot more effective. But I don't want to give away all my secrets, so I'll keep that one close to my chest.
Awesome. Well, I hope you guys have some great interactions there. It's certainly a great place to be. So in wrapping up today, I have a question for you personally. This is something that I do at the end of every podcast that I host. And that is, you talked a little bit about your career journey, which kind of started in radio, right? So we're sort of talking about analog all the way to now you're talking about digital representations of a brand, which is an avatar, so to speak, which is really kind of interesting, is interactive with humans in real life. So if you could talk to your 27-year-old self and you could say, hey, 27-year-old, here's what I've learned. What advice would you give to yourself at 27?
Well, if you look at, I would say radio, all podcasting is radio on demand.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing new under the sun. It's just a matter of how things evolve and change. If I'm going to tell my 27-year-old self something, I would say at that moment, I really don't have any regrets or things I would have done differently, perhaps with the exception of not staying in the same place for too long. Because I think that there are not altruistic reasons why people do stay in places where they have maybe the capability to try something else. Especially in your 20s, you have the capability to do a lot of different things. And at that stage, I was 3 years into my career at Disney. But I also recognize that if though, that you're at the right place at the right time, then you should dig your nails in and not let go. Because I knew at that point in time that was sort of a dream that was fulfilled for me, because I had always wanted to host a morning show. I grew up in Dallas, listening to Kid Craddock in the morning and on Kiss FM. And, these personalities are important, especially at a stage in your life where you have someone's attention. And that's all entertainment is, to capture and hold attention for an extended period of time. But had I have known that at 27, I would have thought, I didn't realize the responsibility that I had would have potentially been even more far-reaching than I could have thought of at the time. Because
wow,
they are today's Gen Z. So those that were listening to me on the way to school, if I were to make a big splash and campaign and this sort of thing, I'm certain that because I remember Kid Craddock, you remember Kid Craddock, there's a certain element that's now carved out in your psyche that it's nostalgic. And so you also have a place in your heart for that, or did. And so it's something that's never going to leave you. So I think that I really know that there's that capability, and it was a tremendous responsibility. But I also think that given where I was at that time, I don't think I would have really done anything differently, because it was just an incredible time where you are having these nobodies become somebodies, and you're a big part of that. I mean, really, and you're also at a time where the iPhone had just been released, and you're going through a revolution. And I had already been through, the music revolution in the late 90s and early 2000s and the record industry was able to bounce back from that. But I think that getting back to having that ownership and having the capabilities that blockchain enables everyone to have, and to get over the hurdles there's still too much mystique involved with it, I think, to be completely rolled out to everyone. Even in El Salvador, I went there last year. I always wanted to go because Bitcoin is now official currency. I want to see how people transact with it. Yes, they take it, but I didn't see a whole lot of people use it. Very, very, very few. So you have to reduce that friction. You have to make it easier for people to really be able to want to use it and adopt it and make it part of their daily life. And that just goes back to, if it's easy and it's convenient and there's no friction involved, you don't really have anything to worry about. The more steps, the more hurdles, that's going to be the challenge. So finding a way to evolve and finding a way to increase the type of interaction that everyone is looking for, brands, people, audiences, and in such a way that isn't so static and is far more immersive and engaging, and also really does, touch their emotions. Maya Angelou, one of my favorite quotes of hers is, I may forget what you said, I may forget what you did, but I will never forget the way you made me feel. So I think feelings and an emotion are something that will never go away, and it's still the most powerful way to reach someone. So finding a way to tap into that and make it meaningful and authentic is really what we're aiming to do.
Well, and in closing, you talked all about experience, and that could be an experience with a brand. It could be an experience with a technology. It can be an experience with another person. It could be an experience with a book or a piece of music or a piece of art. It is all about experience. And when we really look at what makes the human experience unique, it's those types of things, right? Our interactions with our world and with other people. So thank you so much, Blake. This was a fascinating conversation. I could talk to you for hours about entertainment and experience, because at Bank Social, we develop software and we talk a lot about experience. And like you said, a frictionless experience, something that if it's easy, people will use it. One of the things that we get asked a lot is, this whole blockchain stuff. Everybody gets enamored with the technology side of it. And they're like, how in the world are people going to understand this? And it's like, do you really understand when you push a button on an app what happens on the back end today? No, you don't. You don't. But you use it. And the reason you use it is because it's an easy experience. It's a good user experience. And so it really doesn't matter what's happening on the back end. If you're in El Salvador and it's transacting in Bitcoin, or if you're in the United States and it's transacting in PayPal or, some other mechanism, Apple Pay, at the end of the day, you get what you want, and it was easy. So thank you so much, Blake, for joining us today.
Truly my pleasure, Becky. Thanks for having me on. A lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you.